welcome back to our channel Learn with MJ. Today we can look the balanced portion of the topic French Revolution, that is the political aspects of the French society. Like in all absolute monarchies, the theory of the divine right of king was followed in France too. For about 200 years, the kings of the Bourbon dynasty ruled France. Under the rule of the king, the ordinary people had no rights. They only served the king and his nobles in various capacities. The king's word was law and no trials were required to arrest a person on the king's orders. Laws too were different in different regions, giving rise to confusion and arbitrariness. There was no distinction between the income of the state and the income of the king. The economic aspects of the French society. The kings of France from Louis XIV onwards fought costly wars which ruined the country. And when Louis XIV died in 1715, France had become bankrupt. Louis XV, instead of recovering from this ruin, kept on borrowing money from bankers. His famous sentence, "After me the deluge," describes a kind of financial crisis that France was facing. Louis XVI, a very weak and ineffective king, inherited the ruin of a bankrupt government. His wife, Queen Marie Antoinette, known for her expensive habits, is famous for her reply when she gave to the poor, hungry people of France who came to her asking for bread. She told the people that if you don't have bread, eat cake. Now let us examine the intellectual developments in France which provided to be the igniting force in bringing about the revolution. Intellectual developments in France. France, like some other European countries during the 18th century, had entered the age of reason and rationalism. Some of the major philosophers whose ideas influenced the French people were rationalists who believed that all true things could be proved by reason. Some of these thinkers were Montesquieu, Locke, Voltaire and Rousseau. Montesquieu, in his book The Spirit of Law, held that there should not be concentration of authority such as executive, legislative and judicial at one place. He believed in the theory of the separation of powers and the liberty of the individual. Locke, an Englishman, advocated that every individual has certain rights which cannot be taken by any authority. These rights were right to live, right to property and right to personal freedom. He also believed that any ruler who took away these rights from his people should be removed from the seat of power and replaced by another ruler who is able to protect these rights. Voltaire Ii, a French philosopher, advocated religious toleration and freedom of speech. He also stood for the rights of individuals for freedom of speech and expression. Rousseau wrote in his book The Social Contract that the people of a country have the right to choose their sovereign. He believed that people can develop their personalities best only under a government which is of their own choice. The major ideas of these and several others intellectuals struck the imagination of the French people. Also, some of them who had served in the French army, which was sent to assist the Americans in their war of independence from British imperialism, came back with the ideas of equality of individuals and their right to choose their own government. The French middle class was deeply affected by these ideas of liberty and equality. Now we will describe some of the major events that took place during this revolution. That is, the important events are, in France there was a parliamentary body called the Estates General in which all the three estates were represented but which had met last in 1614. It was in 1778 that the king Louis XVI was forced to impose a tax on everyone irrespective of his or her social status. The French government had become bankrupt due to the extravagance of the king as well as help that they had given to the Americans in their War of Independence. This imposition of tax led the rich nobles and the clergy to demand a meeting of the Estates General, which they felt was the only body which could levy tax. The Estates General met on May 5, 1789, but in this meeting, unlike the earlier practice, the representatives of the Third Estate wanted all the estates to meet and vote as one assembly. But the first two estates did not agree to this. The refusal of the first two estates to meet with the Third Estate as a single body led to the formation of the National Assembly. The meeting of the National Assembly, led by middle-class leaders and some liberal-minded nobles, was met with stiff resistance. On 20th June 1789, when a meeting was to be held in the hall at Versailles near Paris, the members found that it was closed and guarded by the king's men. Therefore, the National Assembly members, led by their leader Bailey, went to the next building, which was an indoor tennis court. It was clear that they took an oath to draw a new constitution for France. This oath, which marks the beginning of the French Revolution, is popularly known as the Oath of the Tennis Court. On July 14, 1789 took place one of the most important events of French Revolution. It was the storming of the Bastille, an ancient royal prison that stood as a symbol of oppression. On this day, the mobs of Paris, led by some middle-class leaders, broke open this prison and set its inmates free. The causes for this event were the shortage of food on the one hand and the dismissal of a very popular minister called Necker on the other. The mobs of Paris rebelled against the ruling class, especially the king. This day is celebrated in France as its Independence Day. Declaration of Rights of Man by the Constituent Assembly, 1789 to 1791, comprising the members of the Third Estate and some liberal-minded members of the other two estates, guaranteed freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom from arbitrary punishments. It abolished the special rights and privileges of the clergy and the nobility. The king was no longer to rule by divine right, and several important social and economic changes were brought about. According to this declaration, all men were born and remains equal before law. They have a right to choose their government and to resist oppression. Personal liberty becomes a right given to all individuals. Thus, the ideas of liberty and equality put an end to the age of serfdom, despotism, and hereditary privileges found in the old feudal society. In 1791, the king tried to escape from France, but was recognized at the frontier and brought back. Since then, he became a virtual prisoner. In Paris, the new legislative assembly was formed. It comprised two very radical groups, namely the Girondins and the Jacobins. These groups considered the king a traitor and were in favor of establishing a republic. The king, Louis XVI, was beheaded in public on 21st January 1793 after being proved guilty of treason. The Queen was also beheaded later in the same year. France was declared a republic. A period referred to as Reign of Terror took place in France when several of the nobles, priests, some of the revolutionaries themselves were guillotined, that is beheaded. This period lasted for 3 years. Establishment of the Directorate took place in 1795. It lasted for 4 years till a young artillery officer from Corsica, a neighboring island, overthrew the Directorate in 1799. He was Napoleon Bonaparte. He made himself the new director and provided a much sought after, stable government to the people of France. Thus, the French Revolution ended with the overthrow of the Directorate by Napoleon. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe our channel for more videos.